Ina mana ina reo ina kāranga taha maha o te motu, tēnā koutou katoa. E te mana whenua ki tēnei rohe nai tua huriri, nā mihi nui ki a koutou. Te rangatira mā, te mātua mā, te kaimahi mā, te e hoa mā, kia ora e hoa mā. Ko waio, ko Ngāti Inio, ko Jata Hapu, ko Singta Whana, ko Kantaka Wingwa, he ka mahi e te kura umanga. Kia ora everyone. Welcome along to tonight's UC Business School Thought Leadership event. My name is Ekant Veer. I am a professor at the UC Business School. I am also the director of the MBA program, and it is my pleasure to welcome you here today. I have to get through some housekeeping, and after a slight incident 2 minutes ago, I've added something to my list. You are in Te Koka, you are part of the Hararoa UCSA building. If you've never been into this building before, I encourage you to look around. Just because it is a beautiful, gorgeous building, has a lovely story behind it. It is also fully licensed throughout the building. So if you want to grab a drink and walk somewhere else, you're welcome to. That is not part of the mihi. Please take a moment to familiarize yourselves with the exits. Follow the little green person. Our assembly point is the car park just away from the building in the event of a fire or anything like that. Just follow the staff. I will point around to anyone with a red badge. Those people typically know what they're doing. Do not include me in that list. But Meredith is here, Ashley is here, Jasmine's here. We've got a few people with those red badges. Please just follow them in the event of emergency. Our assembly point is back here. If you do need the wharepaku, if you do need the toilet, they're through this double door here. If you go through another double door, you end up in the student bar. It is not karaoke night tonight, that was last night, but go through that door, turn left, and the wharepaku are there. Please do use that as needed. The format for tonight is going to be slightly different than what we've had from other thought leadership events, and I'll go through that in a little bit, but I do want to start by inviting our Amo Matua Executive Dean, Paul Ballantyne, to come up and say a few words of welcome for us. Paul.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Paul Ballantyne taku ingoa, he ama mātua o te kura umanga aho, kia ora tātou. Good evening everyone. As Ekant said, I'm Paul Ballantyne, Executive Dean of the University of Canterbury Business School. I was looking at Ekant on stage before going, you're wearing your sunglasses still? Okay. But no, thank you all for being here tonight. This is the second event in our 2026 UC Business School Thought Leadership Series. I do want to welcome a really diverse group of guests. So we have people here that are business leaders, we have alumni, we have community partners, we've got staff, students, and members of the wider Otatahi Christchurch community. It's always great to see new faces at an event like this. So for those of you that are new to our Thought Leadership Series, welcome. It's wonderful having you here, and I hope you do come back in the future for future events that we do have. Ekant is introduced as our MBA Director, so I do want to especially acknowledge the partners and supporters of our MBA community, so particularly Ben and Penny Goff for their support of the Goff MBA Leaders Scholarship. They've made, their generosity has led to a real difference, and what that's enabled is leaders to pursue postgraduate study and contribute to the future of business in this country. I had the pleasure this year, so one of the great joys of being the Executive Dean of the Business School is I get to read the names out at graduation. So this year was the first year where we actually had those initial Goff Scholars crossing the stage. As you would expect to UC, we've got a deep connection to this region, so about 1 in every 2 graduates who stay in Aotearoa continue to work and contribute to the Christchurch community. At the business school, we're supported to continuing this, so it's our research, it's our business practice, it's the community perspectives that we bring that we hope are relevant, practical, and forward-looking in terms of what it is we need in the world today. So we see our role as not just educating future leaders, but contributing to the ideas and conversations that lead to essentially what is a better world. Tonight's discussion is one that I'm really looking forward to because it centres on a question that's provocative and it's timely, and for a couple of people on the panel tonight, I know it's been quite a passion project for them over a period of time. And we're talking about dyslexia, and is it something we need to overcome to be successful? It's a question that invites us to challenge some deeply held assumptions, not just about dyslexia, but about talent, about capability, and what effective leadership and innovation actually looks like in practice. Too often conversations like this focus on perhaps difficulty or deficit, and tonight we're taking a broader view, so looking at the advantages that dyslexic thinkers can bring to business and innovation, and what organisations actually stand to gain when they recognise and value different ways of thinking, which I think is critically important. We're fortunate to have an outstanding panel. It's not my job to introduce them. That is going to be Akant very, very soon. But I do want to note just at the outset, tonight's format is a little different from some of the sessions we've previously had as part of the Thought Leadership series. So we've adopted approaches that are dyslexia friendly and accessible to everybody in the room, which I think feels fitting to the topic at hand that we do have tonight. So if we want to celebrate and value different ways of thinking, we need to think carefully about the environments that we create as well. So I hope in conclusion this evening offers fresh perspectives, offers some useful challenges about talent, about leadership and about innovation. Thank you for being here. As I said at the start, it is wonderful to see some new faces. Thank you for coming out on a winter's evening. It is great to see the majority of chairs in this room taken, which I think is testament to the interest that we all have in this topic. So ngā mihi nui, and I will hand things back to Akant.
Kia ora, boss. Appreciate it. We do have a photographer and we do have video happening tonight. So if you are not comfortable about being on film or you don't want to be photographed, please just let Corey know. You'll know Corey because she has a camera. Or Ashley. Ashley was there. Ashley's there. Wave, Ashley. Can we actually give Ashley a clap? She's the one who put this event together with the help of a bunch of people, but Ashley has been the lead for our events team. Please do all direct all complaints Ashley's way. But if you don't want to be on film, just let her know and we'll make sure that you are not there. The format for tonight is that we're going to have a panel of speakers. We've got some pre-prepared questions where I will introduce those speakers. We will go through some of those questions as part of the education piece we want to bring. But then we do want to allow others to have a question or two, a say in what's happening on tonight. I just saw the photographer, so I have to look pretty. And so, I'd give us so much hassles. And so we do encourage you to use this QR code, scan it, ask a question. What we're not going to do is have a roving mic, because what we have heard is that people who have dyslexic thinking in particular can sometimes feel overwhelmed by long corridor. It can be a bit difficult. So I'll try and summarize your questions. I'll have them on my iPad. If you don't have a device that is linked to the interwebs and you want to still ask a question, go to the side. We've got Meredith here, we've got Ashley here. They're going to have pens and paper. Ask the question and they'll put it on the system for us so that we'll be able to still get those questions up there. If you don't want to ask a question, but you like a question someone else has asked, you can vote for it. You can upvote it like the young folks do. Oh, I'm so old. And then that way, that question will definitely get prioritized and we'll make sure. So I will copy it. You might see me passing my iPad across to our panelists so that they can read the question in advance and not be thrown in the deep end with an on-the-spot question, because that's not a fabulous way to treat our guests. And one of the values we have here at UC is manaakitanga, that sense of feeling that you are hospitable to those around you. At that point, I would like to invite our panelists up. I'll do a brief introduction, but allow them to introduce themselves. To start with, we have Dorinda Britton. Dorinda is the co-founder of Unlock Innovation Limited. It's a long association with innovation and mentoring and design-led thinking. Her work focuses on organized. Dorinda, go on the stairs. I should have said that. And don't go near the wet bit. Oh, far out. And looking at different ways of thinking as an underutilized strength within business and innovation as a whole. Chris Cole is also on our panel as an adaptive thinking advisor and thought leader working, I'll take that seat. Oh, yeah, you jump on that one. Because then they won't see you if you're there, sorry. Working in the intersection of dyslexia, learning, and workplace performance. As a late diagnosed person with dyslexic thinking, she brings together lived experience and practical insights into her work. And through Unlock Innovation, Chris focuses on how diverse thinking improves decision making, reduces friction in systems, and creates space for innovation across organizations and education. Graham Grant is our next panelist. Extensive leadership experience across global markets and sectors, including financial services, renewable energy, and forestry. He has been a long-time member, I say long, it feels longer for him than me, I think, of the UC MBA Advisory Committee, and sources describing him as a chairman of the MBA Advisory Board, as well as having the CE role at Sequent. We will talk about this a little later, but Graham has taken a business of 20 to 30 people up to a business of 500 within our little town in the end of the world, and that amazing ability to work with a diverse group of people to achieve success there. And finally, Michelle Sharp is a senior executive and board advisor whose work sits at the intersection of purpose, performance, and growth. She's held CEO positions across commercial and not-for-profit sectors, including UNICEF Aotearoa, and has senior leadership experience in digital transformation, telecommunications, and infrastructure. I have other things to say about you, Michelle, but I do want to say that we have not connected for a while. I'm so glad you're here because I've been looking forward to reconnecting with you. She's been known to lead with passion and commitment and is actually the founder of Purpose of Power and known for building inclusive, high-performance organizations. If you could all join me with welcoming our guests for tonight. And this is where we check if the technology works. Excellent. So, the first question I want to bring to everyone, and maybe we could just go down the road to start, is just to introduce yourself in your own ways and why you think this is an important topic, or what is your perspective on dyslexic thinking and why we're here. Dorinda, do you want to start?
First of all, I need lessons. I have to say that I didn't discover I was dyslexic until about 4 years ago. And it... What? Oh, that's better. I'm not very good at following instructions. Just ask my husband.
Do you want to take the seat, Robert?
Yeah. About 4 years ago, I didn't find it overwhelming at the time, but it suddenly made sense. I come from a family that has a lot of dyslexia in it, both sides. And yet, because I could read and write, I was rather superior. You know? I could always feel as if I was a bit superior to the others. And in fact, I gave one of my brother once a dictionary for his birthday, which didn't go down very well. But it made sense because I'm a big picture thinker. It made sense because I'm prepared to take personal risks with ideas. It made sense because I am empathetic to the point where it's sometimes difficult to handle. There's so many things, but yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Chris, introduce yourself in your own words, and what's your experience with dyslexic thinking?
Kia ora koutou. So my experience, it actually started through my family, and so I'm an accountant by trade, and when the kids were young, we did some travelling, so I homeschooled, and that's when I found out that a couple of my kids were struggling to learn. And so it was from that started me on a journey of finding out about this different type of thinking, dyslexia. But so I pivoted into this sector around dyslexia and neurodiversity, and I was in it. And because I could read and write, like you, Dorinda, I was thinking there's no way that I could be dyslexic, but I was really, really connecting with all these dyslexic thinkers. So it wasn't actually until I'd been working in this sector for a few years in my 40s that I realised I was a dyslexic thinker as well. So now, so I have my own personal journey, and now I also have a professional journey with it as well, as working with Unlock Innovation, but also as a Dyslexic Advantage coach, because it's really probably my drive for that is helping everyone see the value of that type of thinking, so that we, for the individual to know, so they can feel better about themselves, but just for everyone around it to see the value of it as well.
Thank you. Graham.
Hi, my name's Graham. So I'm CEO of a tech business that's headquartered here, but we're all around the world. sell in 150 countries, will be 1,000 people by year end.
Oh,
That's the great thing about tech. So as part of that complex business, you're always working with complex teams and complex situations. And I'm personally surrounded by neurodiverse thinkers all the time, and from a family perspective, there is a lot of dyslexia through the family I've come to learn. And so my wife and I, who's somewhere in the back, where is she waving? There we go, have spent years navigating our kids through how to learn. They don't fit into a box. They are who they are, but we've had to work with them and figure out how they learn. And so the field I'm in, and in particular geoscience, where's Kate Pearley? I'll call her out. Is she here somewhere? Oh, there she goes. First academic I've come across who really understands this question of the sciences and spatial reasoning. I've had to think about this a lot, and so I'm forming points of view. And so what I want to do in my, so rather than talk about my own experience, I want to set up a framework of how I'm thinking about this problem, I would say, and then maybe we might choose to pull on that a little bit, or that might provoke some people to question some things. And I want to suggest that we're here talking about dyslexia, but I would suggest that's symptomatic. I actually think we have a systems level problem. And I want you to hold with me on this until you get what I'm saying. The world's full of systems, medical systems, democratic systems with the PM this morning, and education is a system. And those systems build up through time, and no one controls them, but we're part of those systems. And the thing with those systems is no individual can change them because they're too large and they're too significant. So an example, if you had 110 volt solar panels, you called Orion and said, I'd love to plug it in, please. They go, nah, it's 240. They might be really good panels, might be best panels in the world, but you can't plug them in. You can't connect to the system. And so I think with dyslexia, we're looking at a much bigger problem. And education is one of those systems. Since the Reformation to the Prussians to now, we have built a lineal system designed on words. We teach people by words, they must be good with words, they are examined by words. So live example, what that actually means in real practical terms. In the next 2 weeks, my daughter, she's 400 level science here at UC. She's going into an exam, and she has, she has some sort of cognitive shape to how she learns, which is unique. And she has to go into an exam, read quite an intense science paper she's never seen before, absorb that paper within 60 minutes, and then be panel grilled by 2 academics, and in 15 minutes articulate the essence of that paper. That demands huge consumption reasoning skill from lineal text, black on white pages, and the ability to distill and reconstruct that information in such a way that you can then replay it back. So if you're a non-lineal thinker and you're spatial and you don't like words, and you think pictorially, and you have processing challenges where trying to reconstruct that from your brain, which has got it all figured out, you just can't put it back into words, you're immediately at a disadvantage. And this is a systems problem. And I'd suggest, to be provocative, because my goal here is not to be kind, but to be provocative, the entire education system is a systems problem. The dyslexics aren't the problem. The system is the problem. They are the 110 volts, the system's 240, they don't plug in. And so the consequence of that means, oh, there we go, got at least one fan. And fields, there are some fields for which those linear systems do not apply, and geoscience is one of them. So Kate is in geoscience. Her field is fundamentally spatial. So everything underground is in 3D, you can't see it, and you have to picture it in your head. Dorinda's brother, so I've been told, before he built the bike, saw the entire bike in his head before he made one piece. Who can do that? Like, that's GPU comp. That's really, really hard. But the system doesn't allow you to do that. So I provoke you to say we've got a systems problem. We have built a 100-metre track, and we wonder why marathon runners don't run very well. That's a systems problem. It's badly designed. Don't blame the runner. And so that's the core of my thesis around this problem, and that's where I want to pull through as we talk about this subject.
I need to remind you that it's an election year and you're putting yourself out as someone who could really make change. So people are going to start voting for you. Don't do that, mate. Don't.
Me and politics.
People are going to start thinking this guy needs to run. But I've never heard that analogy of the idea of, you've got all that power, but you can't connect to the system. What an easy way to understand the difficulty that many people are struggling with. Michelle, over to you, please.
Kia ora koutou, everyone. Nice to be here and lovely to see so many familiar faces. So yeah, Michelle Sharp. My dyslexia story started a very long time ago. So unlike Dorinda and Chris, I was diagnosed very early on. I remember the day that I was in school. I was in Mexico City, living in Mexico at the time. I was in school and nothing made sense to me. And we had a relief teacher that came in, and I was young, started teaching us maths. And it was the first time in my life that my world made sense. And my parents, when I came home, I was so excited about this thing called maths, decided to have me diagnosed for dyslexia. And it was found that I had dyslexia. The next years was a question of going through what felt like people were trying to teach me how to change the way that I did things and think differently and do things differently to almost compensate and mask for the fact I had dyslexia. And it went well to a certain degree because I'm very lucky that I have a bit of a photographic memory. I then ended up going to the UK, and English was my mother tongue, and so that all fell apart for me very, very quickly because I could no longer mask the fact that I had dyslexia, and that started showing up in a way in school at a time where kids could be quite cruel, and I was very severely bullied as a result of it. And that meant that as a young, ambitious person who wanted to go on and do great things in my career, I did everything I could for many years to mask my dyslexia because I felt through my schooling environment that I was told that this was a bad thing and I couldn't be that way, and I had to walk in through the door of my career looking and feeling like I was the same as everybody else. And it actually took many, many years and probably becoming older and wiser and leadership to realize that actually dyslexia was something I shouldn't be ashamed of. For a number of years, I was CEO of a company called Kilmarnock Enterprises that hopefully most of you know. And I realized one day while standing on stage, I used to do a lot of public speaking around the fact that people with learning disabilities had so much to give to our business world, and actually the fact that their disability was in some ways, in a business sense, their ability. And one day I thought, well, here am I, as somebody with dyslexia that has spent a whole career masking it, yet I advocate for another group of people who have, different neurodiverse thinking. Why can't I do the same for myself even? And that was the day that I realized that actually I'm going to be a proud dyslexic, and everything for my career-wise changed, and I will talk, I think, a bit more about that in the next question in terms of how that changed my whole approach to leadership and culture in a business. So that's my dyslexia story. Thank you.
And I don't want to stop here. Why don't you carry on and talk to us about your experience of leadership, especially in this area? I mean, we typify accomplishment, especially in leadership, with can you read papers, can you put together these ideas, and can you communicate them in written ways? What's your experience with regards to leadership and dyslexia for you?
Yes, thank you, Ekan. So, as I say, I went from a situation where I did everything I could to mask dyslexia. I would work, much harder. I would prepare before meetings. And it was one day in a boardroom, I, as a leader, really enjoy leading organizations who are going through growth or change or transformation. And most of the time when you're going through that environment in a business environment, a textbook isn't going to cut the mustard. So doing things in a way that you're taught, I've got an MBA and I love doing my MBA, but often in a classroom you're not taught to think and do things in a way that real life presents itself in business. And it was one day in a boardroom where I realized that actually if all of us around the table are able to bring ourselves and be ourselves and bring the part of ourselves that best helps solve this problem, we're going to all round do a much better job of doing or achieving what we're trying to achieve. So for me, that day when I was presenting for Kilmarnock and I realized that I actually have, my own challenges, which are actually what I believe to be my strengths, and I started talking about these challenges, it gave permission somehow when you're the CEO of an organization or a leader and you're speaking about the fact that you have challenges, and don't give me a massive board report the night before I need to present it, because I cannot absorb it and read it. But however, what I can do is go in, and once I've absorbed and understood what I need to talk about, I can talk about it in a way that's going to bring people on the journey. And seeing that I didn't have to be everything to everyone. I didn't have to have all the answers and all the skills, but I could surround myself by incredible people who, the sum of all of us together, could do so much good for business. And by admitting that myself, it gave others permission to admit that they had different ways of thinking or different ways of processing. And I think that was probably one of the things that did me the biggest lesson I've ever had as a leader, and what I've taken with me ever since into the other organisations I've worked with, especially in my telecommunications and IT background, where many of my colleagues have different ways of processing and thinking. It's been phenomenal, and I think every business person, whether you're dyslexic or not as a leader, should embrace that culture of allowing people to be themselves and to bring that different way of thinking if you're going to achieve so much more. I'm sure, in your growth that you've seen there, Graham, you would see exactly the same.
I don't even need to be here. Graham, do you want to talk about what it's like leading teams and your experience? You hinted at it earlier. What's your experience?
I guess, so because I've set the framework up, I'm now forced to respond to that at the level of the framework, not sort of every day. I don't have cute post-it note answers and quips about how we do things, because I haven't figured out how to change the system yet, because it's a system problem. So if we look at business and how business works, doesn't matter where you go, universities, or call them a business, businesses orientate around consistency, predictability, efficiency. And so the system rewards people who think and can succeed within the system, which usually demands sort of linear communication and so forth. And so I'll give you an example of this so you can get your head around it. Who here has ever applied for a job? Most people. There's one single document you use to apply for the job. What is it?
CV.
Is it black and white, and is it linear, and does it form a convention and a structure? Obviously, yes. So if I challenged every one of you to submit to me a CV for a job that had no words and you just painted a picture, could you do it? And it would probably be rubbish. But if someone sent you a CV that was just pictures, would you accept it? And the answer is no, you'd reject it. So I know, for example, a geoscientist he's the chief geoscientist, natural history of Museum of London. He did his PhD drawing pictures. The university let him draw pictures because he couldn't write. That was not a disability, that was an ability, right? So the system of business and the way we assess people and the way we manage and lead people, it's linear, it's PDFs, it's documents, it's ordered, it's structured. And so to lead in a different way, you have to have changed the system. And that's hard. Like, we can be glib about it, but it's actually really hard. And yet the work we do, not the processes, so in the world of geoscience and the world of technology, it's actually really messy work. It's spatial work, it's uncertain work, and it's not linear. So we built linear systems into a problem that's not linear, yet we think we're being successful and we're being clever, but we're not. So I think high-performing teams, we could agree, the highest performing teams would be one where they deliberately design for maximum variation in cognition. That would be an obvious thing to do. You're not going to have an all-black team all with prop forwards, clearly not. But we actually design teams in business just with prop forwards. We don't consciously think, actually, we need someone who's different. And if you then ask people, they go, yes, we do. So show me how you do that. And they won't know. Like, it's not actually written down. We're not even taught how to do that. So if you said to me, great, now go and find a few dyslexics and a few other neurodiverse folks and build a cool team, I actually wouldn't know how to do that. So I think we have this fundamental problem, which means it's all upside down. So I think we have to design away from that lineal system. And I've got some ideas about how we might do that. I'm going to challenge my team to do that. And that causes us to rethink talent. I think we're not bad at talent management, we're just really bad at finding the best talent, and that's the problem.
And it's not even just asking people, I don't know how to build that sort of team, but leaders are literally asked to find someone that could replace them or be the next generation. And so you literally reinforce what worked for you, and that's not necessarily going to be what's good for the organization going forward. So you get clones of yourself year after year, and there's never that space for that diversity. I am handing around my iPad because some people have asked questions. Chris, if you want to pass that on to Graham and Michelle so they can see those questions before we ask them, and why don't you talk to us about what you're seeing in business with regards to?
Yeah, it's just to build on, what you're saying about changing the system. I mean, first, those who have created the linear system have to become aware that it is a narrow system. So there's a whole space for awareness that there are different thinkers out there. And dyslexic thinkers are a neuro minority, that's true, but it's still we're like 20% of the population, so it's significant. So we have to be looking at how can we create that diversity in the system. So we actually need dyslexic thinkers in there helping, create that change without a doubt. So, I mean, and I'd just like to actually sort of take a time here to talk about what is dyslexic thinking.
Please.
So that we sort of understand that, because we sort of know the deficits, and that comes through the education system, because the parts that are hard for a dyslexic thinker is pretty much how we're taught. But there are the advantages, because dyslexia is just another way of saying this person thinks a different way. So even though it's we give it a label, it's describing a different way of thinking. And it has challenges, higher effort zones with it, but it also has this advantage of how they approach their thinking and processing. So the strengths, and what I find with these strengths of dyslexic thinking are they are consistent. It's not, every dyslexic individual is different, but the strengths have a consistency, so we can work with those. So the dyslexic thinker is really good at pattern recognition. So it's like their thinking is like a searchlight. It's wide. It will look at everything. It will take in the patterns of what it's seeing, and where the gaps are, where the opportunities are. They're big picture thinkers. So they like to see, they can see, like you talked about having that picture in your head. I mean, for me personally, it's not that visual, but I still have the concepts, and I get the feel of the big picture of what needs to happen. And actually, if I don't have the big picture, it's a struggle for me to know how to start something. Really good at spotting opportunities because of this way of thinking, where the gaps are, what needs to happen. The other part with dyslexic thinking is we're really good at sensing how other people feel. So we've got this really good way of connecting with people and seeing how to pull people in together into teams and work together. And we have this ability to solve problems, and look at finding solutions. We like to see something that works effectively and efficiently. And so those are capabilities that businesses need at the moment. So when we work in businesses, what we're noticing when we do the work, and you can expand on this, Dorinda, is that this type of thinking is just not being recognised because they just don't know about it. People, they're not fitting into this system that doesn't work for the way their thinking works, so they don't show themselves. It's not visible because they're just trying to fit into a system. And so they will minimise those strengths. The work, it is a system, it's a workplace system, just doesn't see it and just is not geared towards it. The way meetings are structured is not a dyslexia-friendly approach. Communication within in a workplace. And so what this means for businesses is because the dyslexic thinker is trying to adapt and fit into the system, we're not getting the value of their insights, their opportunities, and their problem solving. And so that's what we're seeing, that businesses are missing out. Yeah.
Awesome. Dorinda, do you want to build on that from an innovation perspective? We've heard about pattern recognition, we've heard about efficiency. I'm sure some of us heard Michelle saying, oh, I was diagnosed with dyslexia, but I have a photographic memory. We're like, don't think those sorts of things naturally go together in the minds of the mainstream who don't know about this. Do you see any other things that this helps from an innovation perspective?
Yes. I would like to start by saying in New Zealand we're told we have a productivity problem. I've been hearing about this as long as I've been back in New Zealand, which is 30-something years, yes. But productivity can't shift unless we innovate more. You cannot increase productivity by doing the same thing over and over again. And as someone very famous said, you can't get a different result from doing the same thing. This is a problem. So in my mind, I connect productivity with innovation. But I see the fear in people when you offer a different perspective. I've experienced this in my life a lot. In board meetings being told, look, we don't have time for this discussion, Dorinda. We've got a time frame here. It's quarter to midday. We're going to be finished by midday, right? So we don't have time to explore the greater context for an idea. And as a dyslexic person, I cannot work with that unless I understand the context. That's a value, but it's also a problem to the status quo. It takes a little bit more time. And in my design practice, and I've practiced as a designer for a long time, I'm drawn to systems design rather than things. I'm drawn to systems and services more. And really, we take a section of something and we play with it without understanding that down the road, that is going to have another effect on the context. It's just, you see it all the time. And this doesn't make you very popular. I've spent a lot of time in my life being, oh, she's okay, but, we want her ideas, but we don't want her at the table because she's disruptive. Well, I'm only trying to figure out what the real story is here. That's quite frustrating. But I think once I understood that I was blessed with dyslexia, I can be much more at home with that. Much more at home with that. And I know the role that I've got to play. It's defined for me now. Rather than just being a nuisance, it's defined. I'm here to ask the difficult questions.
Awesome. We have so many questions, and I wrote down 3 for the panel. So I'm going to say one out, and it's not to be answered now, and then we'll go to one of the ones that was written down. But someone has asked, they have a 9-year-old who has dyslexia, but they're not proud of it. How would you help them to be proud of their dyslexia? I want you to think about that for a second, but maybe if someone has an answer to the question that was posed early on, do you have tactics that you can suggest for people who feel task paralysis and they have dyslexia and they go, how the hell do I even start? Are there tactics that can help people in that space? Look at everyone looking around. Chris, grab the microphone.
Okay, so I read this question. So what really helps to understand is what is happening there for the dyslexic brain. And it is that, seeing the big picture, that's great. We can see where we're going and what needs to happen, but the steps needed to get there, that's the part that takes more effort for our brain. So the ordering and sequencing of information and processes is hard work. So it's really hard to do that internally, so you do have to put in place some tactics. So it could be you need to sort of do it externally. One way of doing that is actually working in a team with diverse thinkers, because if people can ask you the questions and pull that thinking out, that is one way of getting the steps in place. I actually today, someone was asking me these questions, and the questions were so good, I was really able to pull out thinking that for me happens so instinctively that you can't understand how you got there. So those questions are really important. It's sort of like, you know, talk, even if just talking out loud yourself, I think they call it the rubber duck method, you know, for the tech, just talking to a rubber duck. So that's one way of doing it. But understanding that, also using AI, that was when I realised how hard I found sequencing of information and how often I would miss steps. So.
I have not heard the rubber duck method, but I think it's the same as my shower speech method.
Yeah, similar. Yeah.
Does anybody else want to add into that with regards to some tips people can have? Otherwise, go on, Michelle. Are you reaching for the microphone, or you want to answer another question?
I can add to that maybe as well. And this is just something that works for me, so it might not be for everybody. And I think that's probably a really important thing to say, that what works for, you know, dyslexia isn't something that you can put in a box. It's just a different way of thinking, and it's a superpower that means that you turn up and think in a different way. So what works for me may not work for Dorinda or for Chris or for somebody else. But for me, something that helps is very much, I'm a very visual person. So if I have a task in hand, especially, you know, you're saying, Chris, if it's a big thing and it's the steps to get there, I have a quadrant system that I personally use where I, you know, put the task in the middle very simply and diagrammatically put the different elements around in a quadrant that help me understand what I need to do in my brain to get to the middle bit to be successful. I'm happy, I won't go through it in detail now, but I think the point being there is finding the thing that works for you, that works, and I actually apply that to anything. If I have to go and be interviewed about something that a complex topic I don't know much about, I will use that same quadrant system to be able to organize my brain into the different things I need to be able to turn up quite fluently on a complex topic. So that just works for me. So I think finding the system that works for you as an individual and applying it is would be something really useful.
Awesome. Thank you. Graham, did you want to, there's a question here about one thing that neurotypical managers can do or think they can do to help people who might have dyslexia.
First thing, and you know, I want to be a bit provocative here, is to fundamentally rewire your brain away from the default reaction, which is, oh dear, dear, poor thing, pat you on the head, you've got a disability. And I'm even nervous about this conversation because it's drifted a little bit into a whole lot of conversations about what dyslexics find hard in the world. And I'm arguing that's a system problem, not the dyslexics problem. But because we focus on the problem, we default back to thinking it's the dyslexics problem. You see what I mean? And it's not. It's the systems problem. And I'd argue that the rest of us, the normies, have got a problem because we haven't really discussed Chris's strengths in any great length, but if you unpick those strengths and you were to list in your brain, what does New Zealand need to do to get itself out of the hole that it's in? It needs those things on the list. So the manager who hasn't got those things needs to go figure out where they are and work out how to unlock them. The problem with the system thing, and I want to get this in case the night finishes and I don't say this point, is that it is so hard to change the system. Well, you can't change the system. You have to rail against the system. And the only way you can rail against it, because you're an individual, you're not a group, you can't put your yellow jacket on and march down the street like the French do, is go around the system. That's your only choice. Yep. And let me give you an example of going around the system. If I just named 4 names, so I picked these ones because they were ones that were in my mind when I was writing this down. So Musk, Branson, Alex Karp, Steve Jobs. Well, there's 4 names, I'm going to mention 5. So those 4 names all went around the system. 3 of them are dyslexic, 1's Asperger's. Doesn't really matter what the label is. The point is that they think differently. They alone have created, between them, $10 trillion in market value, US dollars. That is 20 times the size of New Zealand, and that's 4 people. And every single one of them got spat out by the system. 4 people. Do you think we have a problem? When those same 4 people could have been in jail. Because what's the statistic?
Just over 50% are dyslexic.
In jail. That's just dyslexia. We haven't talked about everything else. Why? Because they were railed against the system, treated as abnormal, pushed against, and so they rebelled and walked away, and rebellion shows up in the form of prison. But isn't it interesting that 40% of entrepreneurs are dyslexic? And we're just focusing on dyslexia here. We're not focusing on everything else. There's a whole pile of other strengths we're not talking about. So if 4 people can create $10 trillion of market value in our lifetime, and those people were walked past by the system, what's going on? So this is not an issue of inclusion. We've got to be super careful with language here. The danger is we walk into politically correct language that says, oh my goodness, we have to run inclusion programs. No, we don't. We have to and rewire the system so that people are liberated to operate to their point of strength, which is the bullets that Chris had, and I'd add one more: spatial reasoning, which wasn't on the list. And if you could get those bullets unlocked in your business, there's a decent chance you'll be a transformative business. But that's why New Zealand businesses are average, and that's why the country's average, because we are not performing as a country.
Thank you. Dorinda, you're reaching for your microphone.
No, I'm just getting used to holding it here.
Okay. Can I, now you've got used to holding it then, for anyone on the panel, just as we're starting to wrap up because we've got some nibbles and some drinks afterwards. There's that 9-year-old who's been diagnosed. How do you help that 9-year-old feel proud of their dyslexia? Because I don't remember what it was like to be 9, but I remember raising 9-year-olds and they just want to fit in. And this has told them that maybe they don't fit into the system. What are your thoughts? Anyone who wants to go first? Go on, Dorinda.
Yeah, well, I'll mull on that. Yeah, well, mull over it. Sorry, I'm not very good at taking instruction, as you can see. Thinking back to my own childhood, I was labelled as difficult because I needed to understand why I was being asked to do something. I ran away from school because school was all rote stuff. No, you couldn't ask a question. That legacy sticks with you for a very long time. So a 9-year-old needs to understand that he, she are one of very many people who think differently. The stats are 1 in 5 globally. Now that's over 1 million New Zealanders. This is not insubstantial. We talk about having skill shortages. We've got skills, we don't know how to find them. We've got the skills that I sometimes envy of people who can do things in an ordered fashion. We need them, but we need the disruptors as well. And I've got a story that I use a lot, and I know I'm deviating from the subject here slightly.
You've got the microphone, we can't stop you.
No, you can't. Is that you can't leave the world to creative people because nothing would get finished. And I think most of dyslexic people, you would say that they're probably on the creative side. You can't leave the world to linear thinkers because nothing would get started. And so coming together is really important. And that for me is my message. I don't want to be seen as special because I happen to be dyslexic. I want to be part of the conversation. I want to be valued for my part in the conversation. We need to come together. If we do hold ourselves as having special powers, then we're doing to the world or to the workplace exactly what's been done to us, is that we have no skills. So we need to come together. The language needs to reflect that. Thank you.
Other people want to, they have their own. Everyone's got one. Michelle's reaching for hers. Go on, Michelle. You were early diagnosed, so you're in a similar
yes,
position.
I was going to say, I was that 9-year-old. Many of us in this room were, but I was that 9-year-old once upon a time, having been diagnosed before the age of 9. And as I explained at the beginning, at the time, for me, it was very much about being told that I had to conform to another way of being, which would, by doing this and this and this differently and thinking differently and masking it, etc. I wish somebody at the time could have told my 9-year-old self that actually the way that I was, the way my brain worked, which was different to not everybody, but to some people, was my superpower. And that's what I would tell the 9-year-old now, is it is your superpower. doesn't mean you're better than anybody else. It just means you're different, and we all have our own superpowers. And I think finding our superpowers, that is our own superpower that we can apply to everything we do, whether it's business, whether it's personal life. You know, Dorenda, you said, you know, dyslexic people tend to have a lot of empathy. That's one of the things. It's your superpower. So embrace that superpower and know that that is who you are. That doesn't make you better. It certainly doesn't make you worse. It's just a different way of being. And if we can, I think you said it, Graham, the whole thing about in leadership is embracing, and it's not inclusivity. It's way beyond that. It shouldn't be about inclusivity. Organizations need this for innovation, for productivity, for performance. That's what we need, this different way of thinking. If you get a group of accountants who all look different, because we've gone a long way in terms of gender and other elements, a group of accountants who all look different, who are all different ages, who all have different sexual orientations, but they all think like accountants, we're still going to get the same result of an accountant. Sorry, nothing against accountants. I just want to say.
No, I think there's a few in the room.
But you could equally have a room of people who all look identical, but have different neurodiverse ways of thinking, and you can achieve so much. So it's that superpower that I think is important.
One of our last thought leadership talk, we were looking at the issues of equity and a diverse workforce, et cetera, and just how some people still see that as harder to manage when there's difference in the room, but the results speak for themselves, and it speaks for themselves here. There is a question that I will speak to because it's beyond the scope here, but someone asked the question around, do you think Te Ao Māori can help us understand issues of dyslexia and neurodivergence? One thing I do want to say, I'm not Māori, and so I can't speak for Te Ao Māori, but the word takiwātanga is used for people with autism spectrum disorder. And the literal translation of takiwātanga is a person in their own space and time. Not a person that's deficient, not a person that is broken or needs to be cared for, but someone just doing things in their own space and time. And I'm one of these people that any form of knowledge can help us understand a problem. So when someone can say, this is a different way of looking at it, it's got to be better for us. Does anybody want to add to that question? Otherwise, we'll go on to our final question for the night. And I've got my hand up here, and Corey's taking a photo. And that's the one that's going to end up on LinkedIn, isn't it? With regards to, we've heard about this time and time again, but if you could summarize it in a short sentence or two, why should we care? I mean, we talked about 1 in 5 people, but to be honest, things have gone fine without having to worry about this. Chris, why should we care? I'm trying to be provocative, don't kill me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because we're good humans, you know? And
Amen.
yeah, and because we want the value of everyone's thinking. And I actually think we need people like Graham, normies, who get it, because to advocate for dyslexic thinking, because dyslexic thinkers, they bring with them a lot through the education system into the workplace. It's not just the dyslexic thinking. There can be baggage, I guess, that can come with it, and it can impact on how we advocate for ourselves. So it needs to be done together. And I mean, hearing Graham talk about, you know, understanding the system and seeing it, and it gives you hope. So yeah.
Awesome. Graham, why should we care?
I think the West particularly has been in an environment of incredible political and business stability for the last, since World War II. And that has encouraged standardization, linear approaches, optimization, all that kind of stuff. That's not the world we're in anymore. And the problems are now vastly more complex. Certainly I feel that. I've felt that in the last 3 or 4 years even, I'd say, compared to my career prior. And how we solve those problems has to be solved fundamentally differently than what it was before. Now, some people in the room may feel very shielded from that, but go travel around the world and you'll discover it's not like that. And we as a country are fundamentally underperforming as a country. On every measure, it doesn't matter how you measure it, we're underperforming. Be it literacy, be it just economic performance, we are underperforming. So if the system that was there before got us to where we are now, it certainly ain't going to help us get through what we're going through, and something has to change. So why would you run a footy team with your best people on the bench? You wouldn't do it. You just wouldn't play the test match. And we're in test match stuff now. So best players on the field, and we've left them on the bench. So I think that's got to change.
Wonderful. Michelle?
I think for me, as I get older, the less interested I am in whether people think differently. And the more interested I am is in terms of how organisations and how society are going to benefit from that difference, because that is the real thing. It's the benefit that comes with embracing that difference. That's why it's important, and that crosses business, it crosses politics, it crosses playground playing, everything.
I'm still voting for Graham, though. I know you said it crosses politics, but when Graham runs for politics. Yep. Dorinda.
I have. Oh yes, sorry. Chris and I have. I'm blessed by having a business partner like Chris, and we don't totally. We're not seeing exactly the same road ahead, and I think we can say that. We're both big picture thinkers. We both share a lot of the traits of dyslexia. Only I'm much more idealistic, I think. That's me. I want to enhance New Zealand's future, because we're going to have to work hard even to maintain what we have. It's not a case of necessarily getting richer and and dominating the world. It's a case of holding on to what we have and what we value, and that's going to take a lot of effort. And so I come from a design background. I wish sometimes I came from an accounting background, but I don't. But I come from a design background, and that fuels my curiosity. And I wonder why we can't see the capacity we have to create a nation that has values, that can live up to values and do good business by having values. That's our point of difference. And I'm probably not articulating this particularly well, but I get very emotional about this. But that's my position.
Thank you. Can we give our panelists a clap, please? There were so many gems in tonight's kōrero. The one I loved, though, I think it was Dorinda, when you said if the world was creative, nothing would get finished. If the world was linear, nothing would get started. So please don't leave. We're going to do some speed dating between linear and creative thinkers over a wine or two and some nibbles. Meet someone different. See if you can start something and finish something together. We do have... I didn't make it dirty. We do have some gifts for our panelists. And Michelle, you mentioned earlier on about your time with Kilmarnock and the work there. Now, as an MBA program, we commissioned a local artist to interview some of our students and some of our staff and say, what is it like to be an MBA student at UC? And she created a piece of artwork that represented the journey of an MBA student. And we want to gift one of those to each of you. And Michelle, you'll see Kilmarnock makes an appearance in that, because so many of our students talk about their transformational experience working with Kilmarnock. Graham's not getting one because he's already got one from a previous meeting, so we got him a hoodie instead. But Jasmine has got them. Can you bring them up? Now, I know someone else in the audience did say they have a gift for you. Please do come up and talk to our panelists afterwards. Please swarm them, but don't swamp them. Don't overwhelm them. They've worked very hard tonight. But please do give one last clap for our panelists. Thank you for your time. And yes, thank you for coming along. It feels like we're at overflow because we do have standing room. Now, these are the sort of topics we love to talk about at the UC Business School. We are a business school that will teach the foundations, but critical thinking, being able to think about the complexities that exist within the world, and not just at the MBA level, but at our master's level, at our PhD level, at our undergrad level. These are concepts that do matter to us, and why I know I'm very proud to still work here, and I'm sure many of our other faculty are still proud to work here, because we get to ask and answer those questions. So if anything here sparked something in your mind that I want to learn more, come talk to those of us with red badges, learn more about it, and we'd love to talk to you more about the programs we have. Otherwise, if you have your diaries, our next Thought Leadership event is penciled in for the 5th of November. And on the 5th of November, we're going to have Eteroa and Julia from Fibre Fale come down from Auckland to talk to us about the digital divide, especially with regards to the equity gap that's having with the Pacific community. So Julia is a former student of mine. She has traveled the world and was the head of, I think, global innovation for HP out of San Diego. And she threw it all in to come back because she saw her people hurting with the digital divide. So Eteroa was Young New Zealander of the Year last year. Julia and her have been running this business for a few years now, and they're going to come and share some of their experiences. So 5th of November, pencil it in. We don't have a location yet, but it's going to happen, I promise you. Otherwise, please make friends with someone. Please enjoy the kai and the drink. And thank you so much again to our panelists for a wonderful evening. Kaku. It is not usually tika to do a karakia motakai without the food being here, but I will do it anyway because it's going to be awkward otherwise. So, nā mai nā hoa, te nahiri o te whenua, te wai Māori o te wai tai, kia ora. And I'll just close with a quick karakia whakamantanga to close the meeting. Unahia, te po, kia wātea, ai kua wātea. Thank you so much for coming along. Thank you for your time. Have a wonderful night. Stay warm.
That was my brainchild. You know, there's some things like I'm dyslexic thinking. Well, this is exactly, you know, because it's a factory, we have to have a bell sometimes to start, break the printer. I'm like, when we built the new factory, who wants a bloody normal bell? I'm like,